We have one point of business to take care of before we proceed. The point is the amendment to tonight's agenda to add ordinance number 13515. Mr. McLean?
Mr. President, we need to add ordinance 13515 for the clerk of courts to our agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to amend tonight's agenda by adding ordinance 13513 to tonight's agenda. Sorry, 13515, thank you. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Next, we have under public hearing, or no. Sorry, I know that I'm looking at Joe's paper and I was thinking that was next. I'm sorry. Next is the consent calendar.
Mr. President,
Mr. Devon.
I move that item A of the consent calendar be received, filed, and approved, and items B and C be received and filed.
Second.
Motion second is to receive, file, and approve item A, and to receive and file items B and C. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 1.
From the Director of Community Development regarding legislation to place tax assessments.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn.
I move that communication number 1, receive and file legislation on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 1. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 2.
From the Director of Community Development regarding legislation to accept a donation to the Lima Land Bank.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn.
I move that communication number 2, receive and file legislation on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 2. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 3.
From Chief Hefner regarding legislation to enter into a contract with statewide Ford Lincoln.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon.
I move that communication number 3 be received and filed, and legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
Motion and second is to receive and file communication number 3. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 4.
From Chief Martin requesting legislation to apply for grants from the Ohio Department of Public Safety.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon.
I move that communication number 4 be received and filed, and legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 4. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 5.
From Chief Martin requesting legislation to apply for a justice assistance grant.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon.
I move that communication number 5 be received and filed, and legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 5. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 6.
From the City Engineer regarding legislation to submit a track application to ODOT.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that communication number 6 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 6. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 7.
From the City Engineer regarding legislation for dedication of right-of-way for Tech Drive and approval of a replat of a subdivision.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that communication number 7 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 7. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 8.
From the Director of Utilities regarding the garbage and refuse contract performance update.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that communication number 8 be received and filed.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 8. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
if we could, I would like to ask Director Gary Shealy to come up and give us a brief explanation of what's going on with our new refuge service.
Mr. President, councilors, this is basically the 6-month anniversary from the start of the contract. As pointed out in the letter, we started with Allen County Refuse, ACR, December 1st of last year. We went through initially a couple months of getting oriented to the contract and the new trucks and so forth, and coming out of that, the misses and various issues settled down. And then I will say that April hit. When April hit, yard waste started showing up. I think residents were getting out from the winter and putting a lot of their excess material out on the street. We had a number of a marked increase in misses at that point in time that we've been working with Allen County Refuse to get those resolved. We believe we've got the trucks, better orientation to the trucks and how the arms work and things of this nature. I would characterize their service right now as good. It's not excellent, but we are building on some initiatives to have that. Within the contract, there is a incentive metrics program that we are going to basically be bringing that out. We need to ensure that Allen County Refuse is putting the necessary resources and management resources, training into their drivers to get us from good to excellent on this process. One of the other areas that we are looking at is the containers. Should the utility committee will probably recall when we discussed this a number of months ago, our containers are up. Some of our containers are upwards of 20 years old. We have over the last probably 5 or 6 years seen an increase in replacement because of the fatiguing of the containers. Going into this contract, we've seen a marked increase over and above our previous contractor in damages and things of this nature, and we're going to continue to study that to see, in fact, is it fatigue or is it just the operations of the drivers and getting used to handling these containers and how they're managing it. I think most of you, I've had calls from most all the counselors, and various reports are coming in from the residents. We are logging all of those. One of the things I will point out that when we initially went into the contracts, only the Packer trucks, the garbage and refuse Packer trucks, had cameras on them. All trucks in the very near future will have. Now the Packer trucks as well as the recycle trucks have cameras, and also the yard waste trucks now are going to be equipped. About 20 to 30% of the missed calls that we are receiving, we go back and review the video data that is there, and we find the residents truly did not have their trash out. They call us up and complain and say that they were missed. And what we find out is that when the trucks went by, the cameras actually record the house, the area basically around where the material sets, and they can literally tell whether that material is out or not. So what we will be doing, and as I pointed out in the letter, is on misses, we are not going to do an automatic callback on the miss. We will literally have when the truck basically, at this point in time, when the truck goes by the property and fills up, there's a SIM card that is in the computer area, and they will take that and download that information, which has that day's route in there. And within that period of day, within that day, we'll be able to tell whether, in fact, the trash was legitimately missed or the residents just didn't have it out. And if we can validate that it was not out, then we are not going to go back and pick it up. If the resident leaves it on the curb, then we will do enforcement of having the material not out there when it's supposed to be, and then that has a fine associated with it. So we're going to put a lot of pressure on the garbage and refuse hauler through the fees that's described in there. At the same point in time, we want accountability with our residents. If our residents are doing what they need to do and supposed to be doing, then we're going to ensure that their material basically is removed as it should be. I will say that Allen County Refuse, they've tried a couple different things and incentives and different programs for their drivers. They're continuing to work on that. Most recently, they picked up a couple drivers from the previous contractor that have come on with them, and they've added another manager into their administration area to basically, again, ensure that the training's there and their practices and processes are put in place to get us to have an excellent service that we all expect. Questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Glenn?
Yeah, Mr. Shealy, And I like to commend you guys, because you guys have took care of a lot of work there. And your secretary, as soon as you call her, she take care of it. And I had an opportunity to go in the office and talk with them. And they do go back and look to see what's the garbage out. The main thing is the timing. You know, you might pick up at 7:30, then you might pick up at 6 p.m. that day on Friday. When our garbage get picked up in my area, they might come at 7:30. They might not pick up to 6 p.m. If they get there consistent with time together, and I think that's where we're having a problem with people, that they forgetting their garbage. You know, because when she go back and look at the tape, when I go out there, she go back and look at the tape and say, Derry, we passed them. Don't go back there. Because I'll go tell them, no, you guys didn't put it out on time. Well, they come 6 o'clock last time. Well, they came at 11 last time. Then they come at 7:30. So they get consistent with their time. You know, I think it would be a little bit more better for them. You know, if they're going to come at 7:30 in the morning, they're going to come. But when you start going all the way push back to 6 p.m. in the evening, and some people say, oh, they ain't coming anyway, then they came around at 8 o'clock and got it now. So I think the time is there.
I guess the response I'd have, Mr. Glenn, is that, you know, what we basically throughout the garbage and refuse contract is appraise the resident has to have their trash out and their material out. You know, the earliest they can have it out is 6 p.m. of the day before, and they need to have it out by 6 a.m. the day of. And if they rely on the last week when they were there, like kind of you've referenced, that could all change. And it all has to do with, you know, this last week was a disastrous week because we had a lot of flooding. We had a lot of, you know, areas closed. And then also the amount of material that is out there. You know, when the leaves come or the yard waste comes, then those trucks basically have, you know, different timing as they go through the system. Now they continue to basically, they use a computerized route manager that's designed to give them the most efficiency for their runs and their routes, and they're continuing to hone that. So, you know, the resident really cannot rely on, well, the truck never gets there till 11 o'clock or the truck is there at 4 o'clock, because those all may change. I understand the concept that get consistent and have the same times, but there's many factors that basically govern when that truck is going to be there on the street. And the best thing the resident can do is have it out the night before or have it out first thing in the morning. And that way they're assured that they're going to basically be picked up. Otherwise, they're always going to be at risk. We've had issues where the truck may not get there till later. The resident calls in at 4 o'clock and says, well, they missed me. Well, in fact, the truck may be still out on the route, and they're going to come by. And so, you know, I mean, the videotape will help us do that, but at the same point in time is that if the residents basically are more diligent about having their material out there at the first of the day, then they're most assured that they're going to be serviced.
And then their recycling truck, their recycling truck sometimes come before they pick the garbage up. And they're using the same kind of recycling truck. Then another company didn't do that, so that's what people get mixed up too. Say they passed our garbage, they missed our garbage, that's the recycling truck. See what I'm saying? It's something you gotta get used to right now, because they got the same truck, they're picking up garbage, picking up recycling. So and then people making phone calls saying they missed us. You know, and you're not missing, you have been recycling.
And some drivers are more efficient in getting their routes run, and they will then, because that computerized routing, they can program that truck to go back on another route that's not finished. So they may see a truck that they believe is a garbage truck picking up recycling. And it is, you know, it still is separated services. So there's a lot of dynamics here that we're all really learning and working through the process for. But the main issue is have the trash out where it's there and notify us if there are issues.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Shealy. Mr. McLean?
Just a point of fact, you know, this garbage contract was a little bit of a savings over our prior contractor, and yeah, I can understand that it's taken some growing pains, but if we would have taken that next step and not gone with our local supplier and went to that next one, you're talking an additional $6 a month. You're talking $4 million over the life of this contract. So, in essence, we may have a little growing pains here to get everything under control, but it is going to save $4 million in our community over the next 5 to 7 years. So, I thank you for your help and your ladies up there that we call every week sometimes, and, you know, all that they do. So it's coming along, and we may have a few more broken wheels, but thank you.
Mr.
As a positive note, on the contract, when the neighborhood cleanups occurred, most of the neighborhood associations were very, very pleased with the approach that Allen County Refuse took, because they put a Packer truck out there and it really helped the process. So I want to give them a feather when they deserve it.
Ms. Adams?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Shealy, we've talked numerous times. You've covered a lot of what we have discussed tonight. One thing that wasn't mentioned, and I'm wondering if it could be put in the bill at the bottom as a reminder to those that have the old containers, the spacing of the containers. The new containers have a diagram on the lid saying you need 3 feet in between containers rather than being butted together. That will save time and efficiency and wear and tear on the containers if they're properly spaced for that apparatus to pick them up. And that's been an issue as well on our part as residents putting the trash out.
Absolutely. If they're set out correctly, it's a much more efficient process, and containers don't get knocked over because the drivers try to squeeze in and things like that. So
Right.
good comment.
Thank you.
Mr. Shealy, yeah, that is a good comment, because I never knew that. After the first week of going with them, I mean, we had a little trouble because we're on Monday in our area, our section of town. And they normally came at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and people had relied on that, and they were there at 6:15. And I will say this, that every week since then, with the exception of 10 inches of snow, they've been there on Monday at 6:15. So I've found their consistency to be very, very regular. So thank you, and I appreciate the work on following up with the other issues. So, the motion, the second, is to receive and file communication number 8. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 9.
From the auditor regarding the contract labor report for May 2015.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lowe?
I move that communication number 9 be received and filed.
Second.
The motion, the second, is to receive and file communication number 9. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 10.
From the clerk of courts requesting council accept the Supreme Court of Ohio Technology Grant Award.
Mr. President,
The motion, I'm sorry, Mrs. Miles? I kind of know what's coming.
okay, I move that communication number 10 be received and filed.
Second.
The motion, the second, is to receive and file communication number 10. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 11.
It's from the mayor regarding the civil service hiring process.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lowe?
I move that communication number 11 be received and filed.
Second.
The motion, the second, is to receive and file communication number 11. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 7-1. Moving on to reports of officials, Mr. Joe Gehring regarding the stormwater update.
Mr. President, councilors, thank you for your time. Kind of got a little information sheet I handed out to you guys where you were breaking there. Just wanted to kind of take a moment, let everyone know, including the public, about our new parking lot we have over here just north of the police department. We're nearly complete with that. We'll get a couple punch list items to do on that. And then internally, the city will be providing the signage and stripage on that, so planning the weather on that one. But a little on the project, we were able to secure 60% match from Ohio EPA on this. So with that, this project was about $153,000. We actually came in right at, or $9 under budget, but right at budget. But so city cost on this is about $61,000. We're about 2 weeks behind schedule, what we were anticipating, but obviously we had some rain to kind of hold us up a little bit. We went with the Unilock paver. It's a permeable pavement that we have on there. A benefit of this is we're able to reduce some of the pollutants coming off cars and some of off the sites. The nitrogens, phosphorus, sediment, and some metals. We're also able to improve the water quality and reduce the runoff. Part of what we need to do, fulfillment of the EPA and securing these funds, is the fact sheet that what I've handed out, and it kind of highlights some of the advantages of the permeable pavement, the trees, the benefits of the trees. Obviously, less water will reach the ground. We'll also be able to reduce the pavement temperatures. The grass, although it looks like grass, we're considering it a vegetated infiltration area. There's a perforated tile underneath there, so water will run off if the pavement were to clog. It will run off into the grass and through the soil into the perforated tile, and then we're able to control the release rate coming off there. We'll also need to produce a kiosk sign, kind of highlighting pretty much what the fact sheet says and how we're benefiting from this. The fact sheet as well as the kiosk will need to be approved by EPA on this before we can go ahead and get those installed, but those will be coming here shortly. Then obviously there'll be some operation and maintenance and some testing that we'll be doing internally to kind of check the infiltration rates, make sure it's still performing. But we're also hoping to use this as a demonstration project for any developers coming into town or maybe wanting to repave a parking lot. For one, the permeable pavement, the brick part, we would consider that grass, so you're not going to be assessed for the hard surface there, and then anything running to that area would be an automatic 10% reduction in quantity there, or in your cost there. So really hoping to get this out to developers or anybody looking to repave parking lots, that this is an opportunity to do this as well. There are public funds through EPA that private development can get for these types of improvements as well. So we just wanted to make that available, but if anybody's interested in a tour, whether it be an individual, group, or developer, we'd be happy to show that. I don't know if there are any questions regarding the parking lot.
Mr. President?
Mr. Tevin?
Just one comment, Joe, I want to thank you, and I think all of City Council does, for securing the funds and applying this modern design to a parking lot. I mean, we're all used to seeing parking lots, and when we as council created the stormwater utility a few years ago, it created a new resource for the city, and it's really great to see the initiative you've taken in applying those design elements to this new space for the city, so thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is ordinance 12315.
Levying special assessments for property maintenance code charges on premises in the city of Lima.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn.
I move that ordinance 12315 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 12315 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
And Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 12315 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 12415.
Amending sections 238.03 of the codified ordinances of Lima, Ohio, governing aerial photographs of the city.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that ordinance 12415 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 12415 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
And Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 12415 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 12514.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Statewide Ford for the purchase of a 2016 Ford Explorer Police Inceptor vehicle.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon.
I move that ordinance 12515 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 12515 15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion? I'm sorry, I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
And Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 125-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 126-15.
Authorizing the mayor to apply for, accept, and administer funds from the U.S. Department of Justice for the JAG Local Solicitation Program Grant.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon.
I move that ordinance 126-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 126-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 126-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 127-15.
Authorizing the mayor to apply for, accept, and administer funds from the Ohio Department of Justice Public Safety 2016 Select Traffic Enforcement Program.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon.
I move that ordinance 127-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 127-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
And Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 127-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 128-15.
Authorizing the mayor to apply for, accept, and administer funds from the Ohio Department of Justice Public Safety FFY 2016 Impaired Driving Enforcement Grant.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon.
I move that ordinance 128-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
Ordinance 128-15. The motion is to pass ordinance 128-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 128-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 129-15.
Authorizing the mayor to submit a track application to the Ohio Department of Transportation.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that ordinance number 129-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 129-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? We'll have the clerk call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 129-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 130-15.
Authorizing the mayor to accept a donation of real property.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lowe?
I'd like to make a motion to amend and change the address in the whereas section and section 1 to 306 East Elm Street and attach Exhibit A and provide a clean copy to the council secretary.
Second.
The motion and the second is to amend ordinance 130-15 in the whereas and section 1, replacing the address with 306 East Elm, with attaching a new Exhibit A and authorizing a clean copy of the ordinance. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Lowe.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that ordinance 130-15 be passed on its first reading.
As amended.
As amended, sir.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 130-15 on its first reading as amended. Is there any discussion? Will have the clerk call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 130-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 131-15.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with the Lima City Schools Board of Education.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon?
I move that ordinance 131-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 131-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? We'll have the clerk call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 131-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 132-15.
Establishing the positions and classifications hereinafter set forth, and fixing the salary and compensation of such positions and classifications, repealing existing inconsistent ordinances as herein described.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that ordinance 132-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 132-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
And Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 132-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 133-15.
Vacating a portion of an unnamed alley located between the 600 block of Southwest Street and Brown Alley.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lowe.
I'd like to make, excuse me. I would move that ordinance 133-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 133-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
And Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 133-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 134-15.
Dedicating and accepting additional right-of-way for public use for Tech Drive.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that ordinance 134-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 134-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
And Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 134-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 135-15.
Authorizing the municipal clerk of court to accept and administer funds from the Supreme Court of Ohio Technology Grant.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Miles.
I move that ordinance number 135-15 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 135-15 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? We'll have the clerk call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
And Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ordinance 135-15 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Next is miscellaneous business. Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. President. Couple things this evening. First one that was in the paper was the numbers from the citywide pride. 52.24 tons of trash was removed, 34 cubic yards of brush, 586 used tires. Also 80 volunteers participated. 216 residents participated, and 226 loads of trash, 26 dumpsters were filled. Thank you to the volunteers and to the various neighborhood associations and other organizations that supported this by participating. I'd like to mention Road State, the manufacturing training class. There will be one coming up July 8th through the 31st, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's a 40-hour course, will be held on Wednesdays and Fridays at the Ohio Means Job, Allen County, 1501 South Dixie Highway. If you're interested, please contact 419-995-8353 by July 3rd. Thank you, nothing else.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Mr. Glenn.
Yeah, Mr. Shealy, appreciate you coming on, talking about the ways about Allen County. But could you make sure they get our timing right in the 6th Ward on Fridays? When I say the timing, could they be consistent with our timing? Could you let them know that? Is they gonna pick up at 7:30? Is they gonna pick up at 6 in the evening? so we can know what's going on there. Right now, the consistent timing should be there now. You know, Mr. Nixon said they got their timing right in their area. I'm saying, could we get in our area that way?
Counselor, Mr. President, Counselor Glenn, I could make that recommendation, but we're not going to interfere with their operational practices and processes. A lot of that involves what I kind of already went through.
Okay,
I
but
think
I
as time goes on, they'll get that down better, but
Okay.
any given point in time, there can be changes in that, and the best resource the residents can have is have their material out more timely.
Okay, I understand that, though. I understand that. I'm just saying, I was just looking at consistent basis. I mean, I want to see 6 PM, then 8 AM. You know, that's what I'm saying, too large a gap there now. Now, we shouldn't be that gapped out, that far out of hand. When he's saying they side is going good, consistent all the time. That's all I'm asking. 'Cause folks I'm getting the calls,
Well-
you getting the calls when they not there. So being consistent.
I guess the comment I'd have is that I'm in the same neighborhood John is, and if your service starts at 6 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
you're gonna get constant service. But if your service starts, if they're usually in the street at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, in those neighborhoods, that can vary based upon all the activity that takes place between when they're out on the street and what happens. And, you know, I think it'll get better, but I don't think that you could set your clock on when they're gonna be there, only unless you happen to be the very, very first service neighborhood they're at.
Sounds good. Second of all, though, we got to, let's give our prayers to the 9 deaths we had in Charleston, South Carolina. That's pretty tough. I mean, we got, my prayers out to the families there. And I know what they're going through. You know, I know we see it on CNN, a lot of folks talking about it, but I'm hoping that we come together. We come together and leave that racism alone. It's not good. And I feel it's terrorism to me. It's not doing none of that when you're killing folks like that. And it hurts. It hurts real bad when you go in a church and take lives away. And that been bothering me for the whole weekend. And I appreciate all the prayers for my son. Thank you guys so much for all the prayers. And it's a blessing that he's here today with us. Also, all the folks helped out with the flooding. And I know I got a cold from being in the water and helping people clean the basement. People showed there was good neighbors. That's what I love to see, neighbors helping neighbors. And till 3 and 4 in the morning, they was helping people out. And that's so good there. And the people on Dingledine told me call their name out because they was a good team there. And they helped everybody out. Anybody had their cars stuck. We had a lot of cars on 4th Street, could not move. We still got some, cannot start. But people are dealing with that. I know we had a lot of folks had questions about the insurance. And I appreciate some of the insurance companies. Had an opportunity to meet with them, and they worked out some things for some of the folks. Come Thursday, I will be inviting some insurance companies to talk to some of the folks. I have the date and time. I know Sam gonna be one of our ones, and Mr. Frazier from State Farm gonna be one too. But we're gonna try to get 4 insurance company, educate the folks on what kind of policy you have. There were a lot of calls and trying to help folks with the insurance because they're dealing with the flood. And I don't call it a flood, I call it a drainage problem. Because we don't have flood insurance in Lima, Ohio. So, but a lot of folks didn't have what they thought they had. So we're gonna do a little education for 1 hour. We'll get Sam for about 20 minutes before we go to this meeting. He'll be able to talk, but I'll get a location and time of that. But it's definitely gonna be on Thursday. I appreciate Martin Luther King Neighborhood Association. You guys did an excellent job. They really, really went out and getting things clean around the south end of Lima. Great job, great job. Husky, thank you guys so much. Allen County Recycling, them guys came out. He brought his people out to help us out, so that's great. They did an excellent job. I know Sam has said they did theirs and they did a great job. They really did a good job. But Husky donated the trucks, went behind the houses. They had things all planned out. They did a great job planning it all out. and make sure we get that area cleaned out where it need to be cleaned out there, but keep everybody there. But I really want to thank the young man who helped out, been cleaning the house. I didn't get his name, but he been going door to door, him and his brother. And I wish I could get their name, but I know he watching tonight, but thank you so much. I know you say you don't like your name on TV, but thank you so much for going in them basements, taking out refrigerator, deep freezers. I mean, a young kid, 15 years old, 15, 16 years old, him and his brother, they just follow me everywhere. I didn't get their name because I was so busy getting it done, but thank him so much. Also, I thank the pastors for praying for the people there in South Carolina. They had a prayer vigil there in the square. I thank them for doing that. You know, 'cause we need that. We need that here. We need that all around our country right now. You know, because it's not understandable, and our young people don't understand it either. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Mrs. Miles?
Pretty much Mr. Glenn has already stated mine here, prayers for the families in North Carolina, South Carolina. And also, I just want to thank the safety service people. I just happened to be out on Monday and all the storm and the water. Wasn't out there intentionally, didn't even really know it was coming, but I had to travel from the mall area out to the south side of Lima here to drop someone off. And I tell you, I saw many rescue efforts by the fire department and individuals that were helping people. And to see St. John's underpath was mind-boggling. I had never seen anything like that. And to see that truck, that whatever he was thinking, trying to go through there, was amazing. And so, in a way, I was kind of glad that was out because I saw a lot of things that I probably would have seen. And I think it's good for me to be able to see the different issues that were happening that day. Around 4 or 5 o'clock. It took me 45 minutes to travel from the mall to Fairview Avenue, and then another half an hour to get back home. So, but I just saw many rescue efforts. I saw the under the Elm Street. I saw the car that was stuck there, and I saw the fire department and rescue and first responders trying to decide what do they do. You know, I mean they had to be concerned about their safety too here, but. We really don't know how much we appreciate these individuals, these safety individuals, until we really need them. And I saw them at work in so many different areas on last Monday. And I really want to say thank you to all of them, the fire department, the police department, you know, all of them that were instrumental in helping people get out of their situations, you know, cars. And so just want to, you know, salute them and say, hey, you know, we really appreciate you. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Miles. Mr. Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, the residents in the First Ward or anybody in the city that needs to get a hold of me, my phone number has changed and it's on the city's website, the one that I'll be using for you to contact me. And I apologize for any problems anybody had in getting a hold of me here recently. Also, I wanted to extend my prayers to Mr. Glenn's family. His son was in an automobile accident, but thank goodness that he's getting better. And also, I want to extend prayers to the people in South Carolina as well. The next thing is that I just want to briefly talk about how I make my decisions here on City Council because it's important to me. When I get my paperwork and I look at the agenda and I go through everything on Friday, I go through everything on Saturday. I go through everything on Sunday. If I have any questions, I'll call people on Monday and I'll ask the questions. That being said, who I answer to on and doing this job here is I answer to first I answer to God for everything. And then I answer to my constituents and answer to the people in the city of Lima. I make my decisions what I feel is the correct way for people in the city of Lima. So, you know, that being said, I, with no disrespect to anybody here, that I don't answer to anybody in this room. I'm going to try to do what's best for the people and for the city. So, and then other than that, the only thing I have to say is be good to each other.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to remind people that We have Coffee with the Cop coming up this Saturday, the 27th, at McDonald's on West Street. And the time would be from 10 o'clock in the morning till 1 o'clock. If anybody has never gone to one, those very informational. It's a good time to bring your kids to show that they're not to be afraid of those guys. It's also very good to get information on how your community's doing, what kind of patrols they may have coming up for your areas. They not only are our city, but it's our sheriffs, it's our townships, it's all of them, and they do a great job of communicating with our people in Allen County, and that's what it's for. Come out and have a cup of coffee and sit down and chat with them. They're not scary, they're really not, and it's very good for the kids to come out and to see that. Some of them sometimes they'll have a dog out there, and they show them that they're very well trained, and they can do anything to that dog as long as that handler's got them. So come out and see them. And again, that's on Saturday, June the 27th from 10 to 1 at the at McDonald's on West Street. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually got quite a few. I'll make this as expeditious as possible. For those that are listening, here and at home, some things have been brought to my attention. We have individuals who are camping out on North Main Street, directly across from the state liquor store in a lot of land, in a tent, laundry hanging up, trash hanging up. One day it's a flea market, next day it's a garage sale, next day it's a farmer's market, depending on what sign they want to hang up. My heart goes out to them because I truly feel that things happen all the time, and none of us in here is but a step away from maybe being in that position. Things happen in individuals' lives that drive people to do certain things, but these individuals, it's not up to code. People have been calling my phone a lot, complaining about the way they're living in their lifestyle. If you question them, they feel they're gypsies. But nevertheless, I just want those under the sound of my voice to know that enforcement is being handled. When I called the police department, very professional about handling it, code enforcement, Amy Odom's department, they were right on it, and I believe Mr. Bill Brown is handling it presently. So it may not be that long, but I just ask that you be patient and let them work it out. And I am aware of another situation where individuals also doing the same thing on Pine Street. I'm not going to give the direct location for that because I know that there's children involved. But just pray for them that something may happen. If you're under the sound of my voice and you have something, shelter or something like that that you can assist them with, maybe go out and help them. These individuals are trying to grow their own food on their yard, and they're doing the best that they can, but there is no running water. It's a lot of things that's not right. But help is on the way, so please be patient and let the individuals in charge take care of it, please. Don't take matters into your own hands. Some of the neighbors were kind of upset. Also, I made a plea to the Traffic Commission that a street light be placed at North and Market Street. It came back denied, and this is my issue. I've had children that have went to Lima Senior. When you are headed east on North Street and you come up under the underpass, the streets merge from right to left. And I challenge anyone to go out and look. It looks like a speed race, seeing who's going to get in first, especially with the young drivers, individuals trying to rush to work. It is a safety issue. There's only a record of 2 incidences, but I'm begging council to be proactive on this. Later, down the road a little further, headed east, there's three different ways that you can enter Lima Senior. And they are all on a right turn basis. The first two is the the first is the front to the school. The second one is the back parking lot, and the third one is onto Market Street. In order to get traffic flowing, in my eyes, if a light was placed at North and Market, once they make that right turn going into Lima Senior's back parking lot, if they follow the circle around and come back out to the light on Market and North, it'd be a lot safer. And there's many, many mornings when it's congested. I know at the time of these studies, seniors weren't as active at Lima Senior because they were getting ready for graduation, and as many kids wasn't rolling around in the morning or speeding to school. I'm gonna be honest with you, I have not talked with Lima Senior authorities. I've had one councilman say that they would have liked to get their input on it, but we're all grown adults, and I believe it's a safety matter. When the train is on the track and you are headed west towards Lima Senior on North Street, once that train is removed, it is a high volume of traffic. And there's individuals trying to turn on Pine Street, there's individuals trying to turn on, I believe that's Jackson. It's just a lot of traffic. So at this time, I would like to make a motion that we override their decision and that a light be placed at the back parking lot of Lima Senior on North and Market between the hours of 2:30 and 4 p.m.
Second?
Second.
Motion and the second is, state that again, you're wanting to override the traffic commission?
I want to override the decision that they made and allow for a traffic light to be placed at North and Market during school hours, the before and after. In the morning, it would be from 7 to 8:30 a.m. And in the evening, it would be from 2:30 to, I'll just say 4 p.m. We'll keep it even.
Okay. All right, the motion as stated by Councilor Lowe. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin?
this is an issue that, these types of things with changing traffic signals requires that warrants be met. And I will not vote to support this, what your motion is, Mr. Lowe, but I would like to see if another study can be done when everyone's there, or if we can, if we had the data to back up what you described.
Well, the reason I'm doing this is so that it's in place when the school year starts.
I understand.
We have North Junior High, they have lights when they come out. West Junior High on Cable Road, they have lights when they come out. LCC, they have lights in place when the students come out. It's a safety issue. And being a councilman, not only because it's my ward, but just being a parent in general, just because something hasn't happened, don't mean that it won't happen.
And I'm a parent also.
Yeah.
I've had kids in school.
And
I've had traffic issues in my ward that I've dealt with, and sometimes I'm not happy with the decision that comes back. But if the data would come back to support what you're saying, I would reconsider in the future, but tonight I would not support it.
And Mr. President, if I may?
Well, hold on.
Okay.
Let's go around and let everybody have their say. I mean, that's the way the rules of council are set up, okay? So, Mrs. Miles?
I understand Mr. Council Lowe's concern, because I have seen the conjecture around there. But I would like for the committee, the council, or whoever, the commission that made the decision, to come up with an alternate, something similar to what Mr. Tevin is suggesting too. I mean, if there is not a light there, is there another thing that can be put there to help with the traffic, or even during, a temporary time? So I'm not sure, I don't really want to think about putting a light there, because it's not really will be used all the time, especially during the summertime and, those type things here. But is there something else that they would recommend that would help with the problem that is there?
Mr. President?
Is there anybody else that wants to address the issue?
Mr. President?
Mr. McLean?
We talk about our areas of having what we call quality of life. And this sounds that it may not be just the whole area may have the quality of life, not only the residents that are there, but for the convenience of the kids that are going to school and getting home, and for the residents that are passing through. I personally would like to see the motion changed to include council as a whole, to put it in a committee, so that we could have talked to the traffic commission to see if there was any alternatives. Also, we could have talked at that point, you know, if they have another alternative, what can be done? There are a lot of things that we can't talk about tonight because we don't have the data in front of us. Yes, safety is a concern. Quality of life in that area is a concern. Those are issues, and I brought forth areas in my own neighborhood about a four-way stop sign and got it approved through council. But the reason we did it was because it was a safety issue and it was a concern of the whole neighborhood. We had signs, petitions from the whole neighborhood there that they were willing to have that sign. Did it have the traffic warrants? No. And to Mr. Tevin, to your, you had one also, that you had the same way done.
I support it.
So I don't know that the data, we have enough to make a vote. Well, I would make a motion, I'd ask Mr. Lowe to make a motion to change his so that we can gather that before we took a vote, if he would do that.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah.
Mr. Gordon?
I agree with Sam. We do need more information, and I agree with Jesse. It is something that we need to take a look at, because I've been in that area during those times that Mr. Lowe's talking about it, and so I'd like to see it looked at more too, to be real honest with you. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? I'm gonna throw my 2 cents worth in. I'm not gonna support it tonight. Do I agree that we need to do something, or at least evaluate it, look at the data? I mean, when was the last time the last study was done? Unfortunately, a study done between now and Labor Day isn't gonna give us a true picture, which begs to the point you make about delaying it and wanting to have it done in place. But rather than overriding the traffic commission, what I would suggest is that the issue be referred to Public Works, to the administration, to report back, and simultaneously to the traffic commission for a report back by August 10th of what either can be engineered into reducing the problem, and with a deadline or a plan for a study completion and report to council from the traffic commission once school resumes. And then bring us the information and either make a recommendation or bring us the information so that we can. I think it recognizes the problem. I think it is real and it needs to be addressed. And you can't, if the last study was done or the design study was based on something that was projected when that school first opened up, it was good and it looked good, but the facts have proven out, traffic patterns have proven out, that perhaps there needs to be some modification to it. But simply overriding and placing lights, I think, ultimately may be the thing we do, but right now, I'm not prepared to do that tonight. So,
Mr. President,
Mr. Lowe.
just so that everybody on council knows, I did my homework. I called Mr. Niemeyer and we just talked. And his reply to me was, it is clearly written out in your packet. And that's where I stand. There was no gray area. There was no right or wrong. He said, we said no, and that was it.
Okay. Mr. Elstro.
I think what Mr. Niemeyer was talking about was what had been referred to the Traffic Commission, which report is in tonight's agenda. And I would just ask, first of all, I'm confused on what the motion was, because the description of streets I heard was Market and North.
North.
East and west.
Okay. And again, Mr. President, I appreciate your suggestion that the problem be defined to Public Works and allow us have an opportunity to try to solve for it. So, again, in fairness to the city engineer, the city engineer was submitted a proposal to put a signal at North and High, which is also known as Tingle, and a study and assessment of all the most recent histories, the traffic volumes is clearly defined for that issue. So if we're going to go forward with this, I would like if, Mr. Lowe, you could define in writing what the problems are, and then that will provide us an opportunity to try to solve those problems.
I do stand corrected, it is high. Okay, when you come around that back corner, around that baseball diamond, that street continues around the corner.
Okay, so we're not
Yeah,
talking market, we are talking high.
Sorry.
So you're
I
still
got high on my
focused
I
on
had
the
an
s-
idea where you were
Yeah.
talking
Okay,
about.
so you are still focused
Right,
on the
I'm
same
still focused
intersection.
on the same intersection.
The street between the
this is
school
my-
and the ball diamond.
Correct.
In the back
Okay.
there.
We can keep doing study after study, and we can do one tomorrow, all summer. It's still not displaying the amount of value, because them kids aren't in there like that. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So my thing, the reason why I want to make this proposal, and I'm so adamant about it, is because if it's in place before school starts, they'll get adjusted to it. If we do it in the middle of the school year, or come fall, or come winter, man, I didn't even realize that was placed there. You got time to, we advertise every time we make a traffic change, so people are aware, and we put the signs out, electric signs, LED lights, or whatever, to let them know. Like, I just truly feel that this is the time. If it sounds like tonight, I'm not gonna get supported. I don't know what it is about the third ward that I can't get anything. But, I tell you what, I have supported it. When other councilmen have came, I didn't even question it, because you know your ward. I pray you know your ward. I wish we could all meet for breakfast and stand there on the first day of school, you can see it yourself. But if I will rescind my motion, and I will make another motion. I would like to refer the issue of the lights at North and High for the Lima Senior School to be referred to Public Works
Second.
and the Traffic Commission.
You still seconding it?
I
He added
would,
to it.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
second.
Thank you.
very second.
The motion and the second is to refer the issue of traffic control at North End High to the Administration Public Works Department for report back to council, and to the Traffic Commission for report back to council with a recommendation for improving traffic control and increasing safety.
Sounds good.
All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Rescind your votes. I want the report back to us by August 10th's council meeting. Is everybody, I'm going to make that as an amendment to your motion,
Yeah, it's okay, we haven't voted on it. You can just
Okay.
vote again.
I don't want this lingering on. So now, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, a couple things here. I seen an incident that happened over about my way. An older lady was going to the ice cream stand on the corner, and she tripped and fell. And I seen these young kids run over and rush to help her. And we got some good people and some good kids here in Lima. And I just want to kind of piggyback off of what Mr. Glenn was saying, with people out there helping neighbors. And it was good to see these young men, and they literally walked to the rest of the block, and nobody had to tell them to do it, you know. And it was a good feeling, so I just appreciate that. And I also want to say to Mr. Glenn, I appreciate you organizing the insurance agents to come and talk to the people, because I also got quite a few calls wanting to know what to do and how to handle it, and was the city responsible, and who was paying for my basement, and it went on and on and on. But I talked to them and directed them in the right area, and some of them didn't know who their councilman was. And you have to be active with your people. Most of the time, I know me and Ms. Adams, well, actually, Ms. Adams, Mr. Glenn, and Ms. Miles, when somebody calls them, I refer them to them and I let them know. I think we've built that relationship rapport with each other, and we help each other out. I haven't had to do too much in the other wards. But I appreciate the phone calls when we work together as a team, and it looks good. It looks really good. The next thing that I'm going to address is communication number 11. Some things were said in the paper. The media contacted me. At the end of the day, I called some meetings. Then I got phone calls back that we can't make it, or some individuals had prior engagements. I think a lot of things could have got done a whole lot faster. Out of the 4 turndowns that I had, 3 of them was from administration. So to say that we weren't moving fast enough, that hindered us. That hindered us. Then I come to find out, Ms. Ann's did ask for some new methods for attracting and hiring minority candidates in the city. I believe the system that we have right now is good. The mayor met with the Civil Service Board. I wish he was here, I really do, because he met with the Civil Service Board and they had ideas and they agreed on some ideas and they told them what they wanted to implement. And then I see this letter and he wants to play it off like he didn't have an understanding, or I'm doing this too slow. We are looking at the livelihoods of individuals in this city, individuals wanting to get a job. I'm not going to rush it because you have an agenda or you feeling pressure because of the way the city has been, or which way the country is going. We need to take our time. We need to get this right. And I believe that the chairman before me, along with Mr. Pitts, they spent a lot of hours. I believe Mr. Glenn was in on this, council period. They spent a lot of time putting this out. It has not been out long enough. The rule of 10 has not been out long enough for us to make decisions and to change it. You widen the pool, you're still going to have a less chance. And as what's been stated at the meetings, for those of y'all that have not been at the meetings, is that it is a recruitment issue. We can have one position, 10 people qualify. After civil services went through what they want, cities went through what we've had 10 people qualify, and let's say 9 out of 10 was minorities. At the end of the day, the administration still gets to pick that one person. And if they pick the one that's not the minority, it's out of our control. I challenge anyone to go up into this city building and start looking around. That's all I got to say. The proof is in the pudding. I don't have to say anything else. Just look around. Whether it be, just look around. He said no proposals also in this letter was brought. The city brought a proposal, Civil Service brought a proposal, I brought a proposal. So that's a lie. This thing that he says is not worth, people have this, folks are saying it's not worth my time to take the test because I won't be considered or won't get an interview. If they have their mind made up, first of all, let me say that this statement is true for some cases because they've taken it, family members have taken it, other people have taken it, and they came back. We didn't get a chance. If we open it up, we said in the meeting, we asked several times, if we pass this, are you going to interview every individual? We'll look at that idea. We entertain that idea. Not one time did they say they was going to interview every single person. Not once. It is true. It is true. Not once did they say that they would give everybody an interview. It amazes me how we're going to have time as an HR director to do interviews when you outsource everything because you don't have time to do anything. He outsources everything. So how in the world now do you have time to do so many interviews? This is just my opinion. I just think that some of the citizens need to start asking some questions. Let the Civil Service Board do their job. They have everything ready to roll right now. I know they do. Okay? He wants us to be patient all the time with him. I'm asking him to be patient with us. Don't try to front on me, acting like I'm not doing my job. And I think it's a slap in the face to our committee. I think it's a slap in the face to civil service and anybody else that's trying to come onto this city as a worker. It's just time to stop playing games. And I did make a comment. I had an individual, I spoke for a long time today with a couple of people, and I've really prayed on this, but I know I'm not wrong. I know I'm not wrong. It amazes me. The mayor, just like anybody else, has an opportunity to come to the meetings and say what he wants to say. I've never seen him in 5 years. Okay? I just started seeing our council president this year for my meetings. I can't talk about other meetings, just for my meetings. Okay? And it's a good thing. That's a good thing. We all need to be engaged. I try to support the meetings that I can. I am not retired. I have to work. I have to provide. Okay? But when it comes to my committee meetings, I do the best that I can. Okay? And I'm going to continue to do the best that I can for the people. Now, at the last meeting, I was told I was acting racist. I thought it was totally out of order. I was told I was lying. I thought it was totally out of order. This is what we need to do as council as a whole. Start at ground zero and let's get this right. Let this council be the one that gets the hiring process right. We can't have rules in place. For those of you at home under the sound of my voice that don't know this, we just had an incident recently where you had 4 individuals take a test. 3 of them was ready to go. Administration says we don't want those 3, we want this one, the one that failed. And then we turn around and now we're going through temp services. If they're not going to respect the Civil Service Board, why do we have a Civil Service Board? They're not respecting the Civil Service Board. That is a fact. That is a fact. I could sleep very well because I know I'm telling the truth. Things like that is happening. This bullying mentality has to stop. If you don't go with the grain, then you're the outcast.
Amen.
It's happening. People at home, it's happening. So, I'm not saying this because I'm running against our council president. That's not what this is about. This ain't low grandstanding. I have nothing, honestly, I don't have nothing against John personally, except maybe his voting record. That's it. That's it. I just want that to be known right now. Okay? I just think there's time for change. But this letter that the mayor sent out was absolutely a joke. And I hope that when they get things together, we do the right thing as a council. And honestly, until my next meeting, I'm telling media now, don't ask me nothing because I'm done with it until I get it right. And we will get it right because my name is riding on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Mr. Tevin.
A couple of things this evening. Derry, I would like to offer, my prayers and hope for a speedy recovery for your son. That's a terrible thing, I'm sure, to go through.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
My wife and I attended the prayer service in the square Sunday for the Charleston victims and the tragedy that occurred. And Ann, I thought of you when I looked at that crowd because many times you've said on the floor of council that, we need to come together, we need to be as one. And the diversity in that crowd wasn't just skin color. The diversity in that crowd was all different face, younger people, older people. It was really a coming together of the community with one thought in mind. It was to support the people who are going through that tragedy and trying to recover from it. The other thing that was mentioned at that prayer service was, this case in Charleston pointed out the importance of getting a hold of our youth, getting a hold of them and helping guide them in the right direction so that someone else doesn't get a hold of them and guide them in the wrong direction. So it was not a long event, but it was a pretty impactful event. And I want to thank the ministers for calling that on such short notice as they did. The third thing is all the flooding we just went through, all the storms. And, you know, I also want to applaud not only safety services, but all the departments in the city that had to deal with it. And I had calls from residents who had flooded basements, and I got back with all of them. And when it's happening, there's a lot of emotion, and people were upset and frustrated, and it took me longer than I wanted to get back to them because our basement also flooded. And I mean, I experienced it firsthand. It's not fun to go through. One thing I will say, Gary, when we cleaned our basement up and got everything out to the curb, we were fortunate that the next day was garbage day, and they stopped and picked everything up. So hopefully, you know, that's the experience throughout the city with what's being brought to the curbs. And I want to thank the constituents who did call, because I think, as Sam mentioned, I appreciate those calls, but I also appreciate the fact that some of the voicemails I got weren't really pleasant. But when I got back with the people, and you know, just like the flood water had receded some, and their understanding, we can't build a sewer system for storms of that nature, and if we as council said we wanted to, nobody would want to pay for it until they're standing there looking at it coming up. So, and the insurance issue, I hope that there is education on you know, for people, and that they learn from this as to what is available to them and take advantage of it. But tough time for our community that we've gone through. We will recover, and I hope the park is in good shape for the Star Spangled Spectacular, and have an uneventful balance of the summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tevin. I move that communication number 5, received by council on June 8th regarding appointments to the Design Review Board, be received, filed, and approved, and that the appointment of all such members be confirmed, and that all actions of the Design Review Board taken to date be affirmed and ratified.
Second.
Motion was second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Oh, you need that motion. All right.
I know, that would be back to the
That's all I have. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I move that Lima City Council adjourn until 7 p.m. on July 13th in these chambers.
Second.
Motion second is that Lima City Council adjourn until July 10th? 13th in these chambers at 7 p.m. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries, and we are adjourned.